Welcome to the Makers Toolbox. I'm Bo Turner from 757 Makerspace. Joining us is a professional landscape designer of 15 years, certified horticulturist, ICPI certified installer, and now CEO of PlantMatch.com, a plant delivery business, Cristina Fletcher. And she's going to be sharing knowledge on getting dirty as you prep your soil, how to pick the best plants that grow on your property in Hampton Roads. So let's get started. Cristina, thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody. PlantMatch is a plant delivery website where you can buy locally grown plants and have them delivered directly to your house. So I've been a landscape designer for 15 years in the Hampton Roads area, and we're going to go over the basic things that a DIYer needs to know to get started to plant their yard so that it looks like it's been professionally done. So let's get started. So today is a Makers Toolbox presentation. So we're going to talk a little bit first about the tools that I use as a designer, but also the things that you'll need as a homeowner to plant properly and to do a good job in your yard so that your plants last a long time and do well and look good. So we're going to start first with a field notebook. So I use this guy right here. It's just a pad folio. I like it a lot because it has these pockets in it for keeping my availability for plant material in here. So I print this off in the wholesale place so that I can see what's available currently. There's no point in designing a yard with plants that don't actually exist locally. So if you can't get it, then you end up having to make substitutions. So this keeps it handy and right there with me. And then I go through every yard, make notes in there, and also keeps it kind of dry when I'm out and about and it's raining, because sometimes, a lot of times, especially in our area, it's raining. So this is just a way to kind of protect my paperwork. I also have some hand drawing tools. So I haven't hand drawn much lately. I used to a lot. I kind of missed it, but when it's something quick and easy, I'll hand draw it. And there's two different scales that I use, an architect scale and an engineer scale. I really only use the architect scale when I'm working on something that's really, really large. And since I really don't do large hand drawing anymore, I mainly use the engineer scale. And it's just a way to take the, to scale your project down. So, you know, 1 foot might equal, if you're looking at this 20, 10 feet is at the 1, 20 feet's at the 2 for that scale. And then we've got Dynascape software, which if you look at this landscape plan down at the bottom of the screen share, that's what Dynascape software does. So most of the drawing that I do now is on the computer. So it's a landscape specific software. It's one of the more pricey softwares, but it's really nice in that you can be very detailed. It's super easy to use. It's CAD based, but it's very user friendly. You can input all of your plant material. So I can actually download the list from the wholesale nursery, and we can input those plants into the software. It makes it really easy to do curves, straight lines, to add details like patio, hardscape, fire pit, stuff like that, and also to specifically do symbols for plants like hostas and perennials, so that if you use the same plants on a regular basis, which most landscapers have their favorite go-to plant material, those symbols are available to you to use more often. So I have a zillion different shares. Mostly when I'm out in the field, I use them to take plant samples. So if there's something wrong with the plant, if it has a disease or an insect issue, I can take a big chunk of it and put it in a plastic bag, and I can take it to the Virginia Tech Extension office. And our extension office is over on Diamond Springs Road. It's a free thing that the city does. You go to the office, you drop off your sample. So I use these small samples for soil samples, these small bags. But if you're going to do a plant sample, you really want to bring a large gallon bag. You don't want to just give them one tiny little leaf or just a tiny twig. You really want to give them a big chunk so that they can get a full reading on what you've got going on there. Measuring tools, probably the most important part. So the measuring wheel, it has a little ticker on the bottom. So as you move the wheel, it tells you how far you're going. So that's good for doing large areas like you would in a landscape. And then measuring tape, if you need to do something a little more detailed, something smaller, or if you need to be more exact, like for hardscaping, and you want to make sure you're completely on point so that you are ordering your materials correctly. So that is my toolbox, my main toolbox. I do have a few other things. So I don't have a toolbox when I'm out and about. What I usually carry is this bag. It's canvas and leather. It fits all my stuff in it. I put plants in it all the time. It's kind of beat up. It's from North End Bag Company over in Virginia Beach. They do a really good job. It's very sturdy. It holds everything I need. This is a 76 straight tote. I also have some really good boots because there are snakes and spiders and sugars in the woods, and you need to make sure that you've got shoes on. And it rains a lot here, so you need to make sure you've got the right equipment on so that when you're out and about, you're not feeling like you are uncomfortable. I also have a rain jacket. This is a really good one that I like that keeps me very, very dry. It's also lightweight, so even in the summer when it's hot, I can still wear it just to stay dry. That one's actually wet, so it's good for my credibility. It was raining today, so. Okay, let's go ahead and get started on Design 101. So there are certain things that you need to know in order to have your yard look professionally done. And it's all the same basic principles that you would use in any other art. So it's about line and rhythm and pattern, and just making sure that you aren't just doing onesie twosies of everything. So that's the biggest mistake that I see DIY homeowners make, is they like everything. So they want to do one of this and they want to do one of that. And they don't think about your eye moving across the yard and it being a cohesive project. They're just thinking about that one plant that they like, that they bought at the garden center. They're not thinking about the yard as a whole. So number one is know your yard. Number two is how will your yard be used? 3, think about a theme. 4, create and link spaces. 5, structure your plantings. 6, plan for the future. And 7, protect your resources. In order for your yard to do well, you need to know stuff that's going to affect the lifespan of your plants. So you can make it really pretty and it might be beautiful that first 3 months, but if you put plants that aren't in their correct spot, they will not survive, and then you'll end up having to start all over. So knowing your yard and tracking where your sun is and paying attention to what's shady, what's full sun, what gets part sun, where your drainage issues are. So in our area, every yard I go to has a drainage issue. So think about what you need to do to move the water around. So where are your downspouts? Where is your low spot? Is there a way for you to adjust that, or do you need to just kind of go with what you've got? Can you install a French drain? Do you need to do a rain garden because you can't install a drain? Do you need to add gutters on your house? Do you want a rain chain? Things like that. So drainage is a very important one. You can see in this picture on the screenshot here where those downspouts are. There's 3 to 5 inch river rock. So a big mistake I see homeowners making is they want to install that small pea gravel because it's a little bit less expensive, but that pea gravel moves. And so when you install that smaller rock, when the water rushes through it, it's going to kind of spray it all over your sidewalk. Same thing for mulch. So if you don't put rock down and you've got these torrential downpours coming out of your downspouts, then it's just going to wash your mulch away. So just making sure that you pay attention to stuff like that so that you can move the water to the hardscape and you don't have any issues with standing water in your mulch beds. Same thing goes for the rest of the yard. If you find your low spot, pay attention to where it's holding water and see if there's a way to move it elsewhere. So legally, you can't move water from your yard to your neighbor's yard. You need to move it out to the street. So that might involve grading. It might involve a French drain. If you can't do that, maybe you could do a dry well. You could do rain barrels at the downspouts just to help hold some of that water, and then you can reuse it for vegetable gardens and things like that. It's also really good for indoor plants. But that should be your number one issue around here is where is the water hang up? And then sun and shade. So part of this is just making sure you read your plant tags and knowing that the plant that you just bought is full sun or can handle some shade. Talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, or do your research. The internet's great for stuff like that. If you look at PlantMatch, you can see there are certain categories. You can type in like sun, shade, and sun or shade, and it'll spit out a couple options for you of plants that work in those conditions in our area. Soil sample. So there are certain plants that don't do well in certain areas. For instance, hydrangeas need high pH in order to do really well. And a lot of the other flowering plants, perennials and stuff, need a little bit less. So make sure that if you are having an issue in your yard where it's very bare or you can't get anything to grow, go ahead and take a soil sample. There are a few things in our area like sudden oak death syndrome that if you have a bunch of plants that for whatever reason just don't make it, like if you've got maybe 4 or 5 plants that you just put in and none of them do very well, there might be an issue with your soils. You might have a fungal problem, which is common because of all the rain. You might have some weird insect in there that you're having a hard time with. And taking a soil sample to the extension office can help you figure out what that issue is. Our area also, you have to worry about wind and salt spray. So making sure that the plants that you use are able to handle whatever area you're in. So that's just knowing your spot, knowing your yard and the kind of conditions that you have to deal with, but making sure you're paying attention to it. So I would suggest mapping it out. So you can go to Google Earth and you can take a screenshot of your house from the top and just take a piece of paper and trace over top of your footprint. And then you can map out which parts in your yard have more sun, more shade. This is a really good tip on being able to track your stuff. So you can say, okay, well, this part to this part gets, 4 to 6 hours. This part to this part gets really like 2 hours of sun a day. And then you can choose your plants accordingly. Usage. So know what you're going to use your yard for. Some people have kids, they have pets, they want to entertain a lot, or really maybe they want to just do edible gardening. They want to just plant the whole thing up with stuff they can eat. So knowing what you're doing for what you're going to use the yard for is super important. If you have a pet, make sure you've got a spot for them to use the bathroom. If you've got kids, they need maybe a space for a trampoline, or they need space for throwing a ball around. And if you entertain a lot, maybe you want a fire pit. Maybe your dog tears the yard up, and when he hits the ground running, he really tears your grass up. So if you put a little hardscape landing spot there, that might help with your problem. So just knowing what your issues are and what you're going to use the yard for is a huge part of design, because the whole point is that you want to be out there enjoying it. And if the yard's not looking good because you didn't think that the kids were going to be playing ball or soccer in your mulch beds, then it's not going to do so well. You don't want to plant a bunch of roses in a place where the dog needs to use the bathroom. So just knowing what you're going to use the space for is important. Theme. So if you're going to really make your yard cohesive, think about the architecture of your house, think about what is important to you aesthetically. So most people already kind of have an aesthetic, either they're contemporary or they're a little bit on the formal side, or they're really cottagey, loosey-goosey. They might like a more natural look. So your yard should be a reflection of your personality. It should be a reflection of your home. So it's just an outside version. So whatever your style is on the inside, you should move that to the outside as well. There are lots of different ways to do that. Formal is very tight lines using traditional plant material like hydrangeas and boxwoods, and nice and tidy, clean, nice and clipped. Contemporary, you can use things that have more form to them, like crazy yucca that have pointed leaves, or you could do very modern lines, just straight, a crazy straight line, long line of something with a really cool form, like grasses. Or if you really want to go nuts and you have that whole Victorian style house, you can go full cottage and plant peonies and all the flowering things and have all the birds and the bees and the butterflies in your yard. So that is a very personal thing, but in order to really make it look professionally done, having a theme for your yard makes a huge difference. And that's just a reflection of yourself and what you appreciate and what you like to see, um, in order to enjoy your yard to the fullest. Creating spaces. So if you look at the screenshot there, you can, so this was a very tiny backyard in Chesapeake. She had specific wants. She wanted a patio for her to sit out on. She wanted a little bubbler so you can't see it, but where that path leads, you can see it on the landscape plan. There is a small bubbler that comes up through the pavers, for her grandkids to be able to play in the water without it being dangerous, just something to like kick around. She wanted something for the birds to come and be able to drink. So she wanted something that was traditional, but a little bit on the modern side. So we did a traditional patio, and then we used the cut stone path to make it look a little bit more modern. And then we just planted up all of the rest of it. That the lattice screen hides the AC unit, but now they're separate living spaces or separate spaces. So there's a space to sit and relax. There is a nice little path to walk down. There is a little bubbler for you to go and play with if you're a child, or if you just want to go hang out by the other side of the yard. And you can't see it, but behind the arborvitae on that back side, oh yeah, you can on the plan. There's a little bench over there. So you can sit over there on the bench and you can watch the kids play at the bubbler, and if you want to take a break and just be on in another part of the yard. Also, it feels very secluded. So just separate spaces and utilizing your space to the best of your ability. So try not to leave just things that are open, but giving every single part of your yard a purpose. So yes, maybe there's a giant open area, and that open area is a planned open area. It's not just empty space. And making sure that that's also practical. So if you're having an open space, putting beds around it so it's easy to mow. And if you're making a hardscape patio, ensuring that it's the right size for what you want to use it for. So you, for instance, you need 9 feet on a pool deck in order to put a lounge chair, stuff like that. So just thinking about those things and making sure that when you are planning things out, that you are planning for separate outdoor living spaces. And it allows movement through the yard. It just adds a little bit more interest than just having one giant space that's open to everything. And it makes people kind of wander around, which when they're outside, they like to do. So little separate conversation vignettes and stuff like that. Structure. So choosing plants that have layers. So you want stuff that's tall if you've got a tall house. Usually on the corners, you want something that's evergreen as your foundation plant so that when you're in the dead of winter, you still have something pretty to look at. But then you also want those lower layers too. You want flowering perennials, and then below that, even some ground cover and stuff. So really that's what makes an interesting yard. Having plants that are all the same height don't add any real interest, but having those layers and having canopies, and then your medium-sized shrubs, and then your smaller shrubs, and then your perennials, and then your low-growing ground covers, that's going to make your yard really stand out. And also you can play with it so much by adding things that bloom at different times of the year, things that are evergreen or have color all year round, like this lower petalum in the screenshot is purple, and it keeps that purple color all year. You can also making sure that when you're doing the structure of your yard, you're choosing plants that will deal with if you have like a screening issue or your neighbors are really loud and you want to plant something that's going to help screen that area, that you're planning for what that's going to look like. You're not just like, okay, I'm going to put a giant plant here and that's going to solve my problem. Okay, well, let's put that plant somewhere else too, maybe, so that it doesn't look random. And you can see with these lower petalum, there's more than just one. There's a couple going down the row. And same thing with the arborvitae. It's a whole row of arborvitae. So it looks planned out. It's not like something just grew there. And if you are really into the natural look, you can by all means go nuts and plant whatever you'd like. But even a natural planned garden has some rhythm to it. So if you are in love with native plants and you love coreopsis, and you want to use that plant, pick a couple different places for it, and that moves your eye throughout the yard so that it's not random, it looks planned. Plan for the future. So that is a giant live oak in that front yard. It's beautiful, beautiful. And I wouldn't be surprised if that house is actually built around that tree and not the other way around. But reading the plant tags on your material is really important. So knowing how big that plant's going to get. For example, I see people planting knockout roses all the time and not knowing that that plant can get 6 feet tall, and will completely take over your yard. You're going to be cutting it back every single day. I see it a lot with screen hedges too. So you might want something that grows really fast and it's going to fill in really quickly, but then you're going to end up having it's maybe blocking your walkway and you have to cut it back every couple weeks so that you can get by with trash cans, stuff like that. So not planting giant trees too close to the house. River birches are an issue. I see them planted by houses all the time. They're super, super messy. They're going to drop things in your yard. They're going to impede on your space. So just knowing how big a plant's going to get. And in our area with the humidity and all of the rain that we get, things grow like crazy here. So they are going to get bigger usually than what they say on the tag. So if your plant's saying 4 feet, plan for it to get 5 feet. And there are certain plants, like you might want to add a couple extra feet to it width-wise and height-wise, just because we do have a crazy growing season here. And our area really likes to dump rain on stuff. So just make sure that when you do a design, you're planning for that full 6 feet for the future size of it, not for the size that it is when you first get it, which is easy to do. You pick up plants from a garden center and they're only a certain size, and so you put them close together because they look so small, but you have to think about how big that plant's going to get eventually, and make sure you give them the space. And most tags will say 2 feet on center, plant 2 feet on center, plant 4 feet on center. If you read it carefully, or if you do your research, make sure that you look at that and plan for that, because or else you're going to be ripping stuff out later, and that's a waste of money. Protecting your resources. So this picture has a couple different things. It's got the Lynn Haven and River Now website on it, which has a lot of really good information on native plant material, on collecting water, on the CBPA, which is the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. And in our area, Virginia Beach in particular, Norfolk too, if you're close to the water, there are certain things you are and are not allowed to do in your yard. So you can add plant material, but you can't rip out an impervious surface. So say you want to put in a big giant patio in your backyard on the water in Virginia Beach. You're not legally allowed to do that. You can't just come through and mow stuff down. You have to go through the city and the permits office and make sure that you're allowed to install what you would like to install. There are certain ways to get what you want, even dealing with the CBPA. So say you want a large patio, you can do a permeable version of that, which is just a different installation. So a hardscape patio is like concrete. The water just rushes right off of it. But in a permeable system, the installation is different, and the water actually enters into the patio, is stored there until it's able to be dispersed through the ground. So the picture on the right over here is a driveway in Virginia Beach over in the north end, and it's a permeable driveway. So they wanted to put in a full driveway, but they couldn't because of the CBPA. So instead, there is a hardscape apron there because the gravel gets kicked around. This is actually crushed granite in that picture, but the water is able to infiltrate, and it actually gets cleaned by the ground before it enters into the waterway. So it's just a little bit of a healthier way to plan your yard and to be cognizant of that and to pay attention. So the picture on the left is a rain barrel. So you can put those at your downspouts to collect water. They fill up really quickly around here, and you can reuse that water for other purposes like vegetable gardening or using them for indoor plants. Indoor plants really like rainwater. They have rainwater has nutrients in it that tap water does not have. There's also stuff in tap water that plants don't like sometimes. So if you want healthier indoor plants, using rainwater can help you with that. Lynnhaven River now has a ton of things for homeowners to make it so that they're trying to help you out. So there are grants and there's money there. So if you were to go to their website, there are things you can do they'll subsidize you planting a rain garden. They'll help you out if you want to rip out turf and plant native plants, and they'll give you a rain barrel for free. So there's a lot of stuff that you can use with them. They're trying to help you. They're trying to help the environment. They're trying to help our area. So utilize them and check out the website. That native plants link right there in the screenshot is fantastic. It's a really good resource. They've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort putting that together. So there's really good pictures. It's really good information. And if you really are interested in that kind of thing, I think you should take a look. The Makers Toolbox is one thing, but then going to actually install something, it's completely different. So what's in my Makers Tool shed on how to properly install plant material in our area. So compost and perlite. If you're going to plant new plants, you really want to amend the soil, and that goes for any yard in the Hampton Roads area. So that's adding compost, it's adding perlite. Perlite is going to help aerate the root. When you plant your plants, it's going to help them get to not get root rot. So, and it helps with moisture issues and things like that. So using a tiller, really tilling that whole bed up, mixing the compost in, and not everybody has access to a tiller, I understand that, so using a hoe or something. But making sure that you're not just putting compost on and perlite on top, the top layer, but mixing it into the soil. If you just put it on top, then when you plant your plant, those roots are going down below it, and you're not getting the benefits of actually amending the soil. So definitely using compost and perlite to make sure that your plants have the best start possible. Makes a huge difference. Bed prep is everything when it comes to planting a new yard, and will completely change your outlook on how your plants do. So definitely do that first. A spade is that little angled spade. It's just a planting spade. It's got that sharp edge on it so that you can plant really quickly. The flat shovel I really like for cleanup. So I use it mostly to scrape mulch off the sidewalk and clean up in general. It's my favorite tool. I probably use that flat shovel the most. It's the one thing I would recommend if you're starting out. A tiller, if you've got one. I just actually borrowed one from a friend the other day to do my vegetable garden. But to till that soil amendment into your beds. Fish emulsion fertilizer is my game changer. It's my secret weapon. I use it on everything. So nice thing about fish emulsion is you can put it on any plant, and it's not only going, most of the time it comes in liquid form, and so you just pour a little bit around the root zone and water it in. It's super easy. You don't have to do a whole lot to it. It's going to make any plant in your yard happier. You're not going to have to worry about fertilizer burn. It actually amends the soil. Instead of when you do regular fertilizer, like the 10-10-10 granular stuff, eventually it leaches out. So with enough water, that fertilizer is gone in a couple of weeks, couple of months. But the fish emulsion fertilizer actually amends the soil over time. So the more you use it, the better your soil quality is. It's a little smelly for that first 24 hours. If you have a dog, I suggest leaving them inside while that sits for a day, or they're going to roll around in it. They love that stuff. But it really does make a difference. If you've got an older yard, something like those old azaleas that get really leggy, if you prune them properly and put that fish emulsion on it, it will completely change what your yard looks like. It is my all-time favorite tool. Hardwood mulch. So there are lots of different kinds of mulch out there. I just recommend regular old hardwood mulch. You want to do at least 3 inches. That helps make sure your roots don't dry out when you first plant them. It also breaks down over time and amends your soil as well. If you're doing things that have a lot of dye and stuff in them, you can still do it, but it's not as good for your yard as if you just use regular hardwood mulch. So I always get questions this time of year on planting raised beds and edible gardening. So raised beds was a really big trend over the last couple of years. And if you're going to do that, it's a really easy way to get started on vegetable gardening. Um, and most of the time when we install them, it's a 4 foot by 4 foot bed. And that's so that you can reach from one end to the middle. So you don't want to make a giant one that you can't get to the inside of. So just planning out your raised bed. So you could do a long one that was not as deep so that you could get to the middle of the bed. That's all. So 4 foot by 4 foot being the norm because you can get to the middle of it on all sides. There are all kinds of new ways to do this now, edible gardening stuff. So I really like my edible gardening stuff mixed in the regular landscape. So that's becoming a really big trend if you are interested in that kind of thing. And putting tomatoes and basil and stuff in mixed in your regular garden bed. There's this great author, her name's Brie Arthur. And she wrote a book called The Foodscape Revolution. That book is wonderful. It's a really good resource if you have a chance to read it. So I talked a little bit about here about companion plants and what to plant in the same bed in order to get higher yield. So there are certain things like tomatoes really like being planted by marigolds because marigolds help with the insects that affect plants, tomato plants. So do your research, look online. There are zillions of planting plans for raised garden beds. For example, corn stalks provide support for the climbing beans. So you plant corn and beans. Well, it's the whole Three Sisters thing, right? The Native American thing of squash, corn, beans. But so squashes prickly leaves, crops from raccoons, and shade the ground, preventing weeds. Beans return nitrogen to the soil. This will be available to corn and squash in later years. So certain plants have different output that other vegetable plants need. So if you plant the right things together, your garden's going to do a little bit better. And there are whole easy to read, easy to plan things on resources online to look that up. That's a big part of planting a vegetable garden is knowing what's going to do well together and what's going to fight each other.
Let's see, first question, what's the hardest thing about landscape design?
The hardest thing is knowing which plants are going to do well where you need them to go. So that just comes with time and reading all the plant tags and experience.
What would you recommend to someone that was just getting started out in landscape design?
If you are really interested in the design part and you would like to do that as a career, I would say work in a garden center, get your feet wet, learn all the plants first, listen to the other people that work there talking about this plant, talk to the customers about what's been going on in their yards. You'll learn a lot over a couple of years if you really look at all the tags in this garden center, because you're gonna see every popular plant at that garden center. So it's a good way to get your feet wet.
What life lesson have you learned that plants have taught you?
Everything is constantly evolving and you kind of have to go with the flow, and not everything's going to work out the way that you want it to. There are plants that die for absolutely no reason at all, or you'll plant an entire yard just to have a hurricane come through and wipe the whole thing out. So yeah, and planning for growth and knowing that things are going to fill in and change constantly, and to plan on that happening. And I think that's the big one.
That's our time for tonight's Makers Toolbox. So much, Cristina, and for everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, guys.